All right, everybody. Cinephile Mike is here, and it is episode 17 of Oscar Rewind Season 2, my bi weekly series dropping every Tuesday and Friday, where I revisit films that reflect the work of this past year's Oscar nominees and winners. I dig deep into those IMDb profiles, and my hope is that you will discover a new, older favorite or maybe revisit something you haven't seen in a while. As always, I'll be discussing the Oscar connection, awards history for the film, box office information, critical response, and as always, these reviews are spoiler free. But before we jump in, please make sure that you click that subscribe button. You definitely don't want to miss any part of the journey we go on in Rewind because there are some good films coming up. So, we are in May, and this is Actor Month. All of May's Rewind films will look at as many of this past year's nominees and winners earlier in their careers. And today, we are looking at United Artists and MGM's Igby Goes Down. Written and directed by Burr, Igby Goes Down was released in the fall of 2002 in limited release. Now, by the end of its theatrical run, the film made $4,777,465 domestically, with an additional $2,141,733 internationally, for a worldwide total of $6,919,198. Critically, the film was pretty similar, with Rotten Tomatoes showing the film with a 75% critical rating from 134 reviews and a slightly higher percent, 80% popcorn meter, culled from over 25,000 ratings. Now, award season wise, the film had a small showing, and while it didn't reach Oscar heights, it did have recognition at some of the major circuits. Amongst its 24 nods and wins, some of the standouts include being awarded with a special recognition for excellence in filmmaking from the National Board of Review, lead performer Kieran Culkin sitting right there on the couch, and supporting performer Susan Sarandon were nominated for Golden Globes in the lead actor, comedy, or musical, and supporting actress categories, respectively. Sears was nominated for Best First Screenplay at the Independent Spirit Awards, and Culkin won the Best Young Actor/Actress at the Critics' Choice Awards, as well as Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy at the Satellite Awards, which also nominated the film for Best Screenplay and Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. So, why is it here? Well, in addition to Saldana, who I discussed earlier this week with Center Stage, Culkin was virtually untouchable, winning the Best Supporting Actor Oscar and pretty much every supporting actor or supporting performance award this whole season for his role as the angsty Benji in A Real Pain. And how fitting as we look here at what many have considered his breakthrough role over 20 years ago, where he is a real pain to some people in his role of Jason Igby Slocum Jr. So, how does Igby go down? Well, the title comes from a sequence in which Igby, played by Culkin, is beaten up by his peers at military school, and then affectionately they say to him, and Igby goes down. Not that simple, though. Igby is, you could say, a Holden Caulfield variant for the late 90s, early aughts. Not seeing much good in anyone, Igby is not able to live up to the expectations of his alcohol and pill swigging judgmental mom, Mimi, played by Sarandon. Yes, he calls her Mimi because Heinous One is a bit too much of a mouthful. His collegiate, preppy older brother, Ollie, played by Ryan Phillippe, who he can't seem to make much of a connection to, despite best efforts, and their father, Jason, played by Bill Pullman, who is a schizophrenic who we are not sure whether or not he is still in the picture, as much of his scenes are played out amongst flashbacks where Igby is played by Culkin's real life younger brother, Rory Culkin. Now, Igby does come from a family of means, but it's just not for him, the prep school life. He gets kicked out of several prep schools before having to be sent to military school, which, from the aforementioned fight, he is then expelled from military school. And through a series of events, he sort of becomes a vagabond, finding solace in a loft apartment owned by his godfather, D.H., played by Jeff Goldblum, and his wife, Bunny, played by Celia Weston, who is so high on life, Bunny, that, and perhaps other things, that she's not even realized that DH is running around behind her with, well, I'll leave it there. Now, as Igby contemplates his next step, he will ingratiate himself with several individuals he meets directly and indirectly by working for DH. Primarily amongst these are Rachel, played by Amanda Peet, an artist who doesn't seem to produce much art, who's having an affair with DH and renting a massive loft from him. Rachel's friend and performance artist, Russell, played by Jared Harris, and college student slash cater waiter, Suki, played by Claire Danes. Each of these individuals will have a role to play as Igby eventually determines his next steps into adulthood, which he believes he is ready for, despite his meager 17 years walking the planet. To say any more would kind of undermine the journey of Igby's that is worth the watch. So I'm going to end the summary there. I have to say, this film is, easily considered in that higher echelon of films about, kind of destructive, confused individuals in the early aughts. The indie spirit of this film is felt through and through. It's kind of like similar other films of this time period that came like the same time before and after. Zach Braff's Garden State, Pieces of April, Roger Dodger, films that had protagonists that, sometimes their biggest enemy and challenge was themselves and how to get over that in order to find the comfort and solace in the next step. I have to say, in this role, Culkin was an absolute delight. And as I said before, many considered this his breakout role, despite the earlier credits on his resume, such as Cider House Rules, She's All That, and even, playing in those early comedies, Home Alone 2, Father of the Bride. This film puts him front and center, and first-time feature film writer and director Burr crafted a decent tale for him to really shine. He truly does play, pardon the pun, but it's true, a real pain to his mother, to his brother, and yet you wonder if his actions are not entirely unjustified. I mean, all you need to do is look into his pain face, and we see that look that has captivated us for all these years since in other projects. And, you wonder, yes, he's acting out, but is it without cause? He's really kind of able to cut people down with a side comment or some interesting observation. And when some of the comments land, it does. So there is some really sharp writing in Steers' script. And, some of them land with as much of the beatings that Igby goes through his years, which Steers doesn't shy away from. You know, and of all the players that are in Igby's orbit, it is a collection of who's who performers of the time, and all of the performances are solid. There's really not a weak one in the bag. Sarandon as the uptight Manhattan mom is chillingly executed. Goldblum, I have to say, he kind of underplays that normal, larger than life persona, which he, has kind of relied on, especially in more recent years. And that kind of lends nicely his underplaying into a third act shift that you don't see coming. Philippi was interesting. He always kind of had that monotone that was a little bit one level, but it actually really works for his disaffected Columbia student here. And of the friends, I had to say Danes was really a standout for me too, playing this more of a free-spirited, easygoing character. Not saying that she doesn't have her own damages in this character. Um, but it was a change from some of the other roles that we've seen her play. Now, aside from the performances, I'm not going to sit here and say this is an amazing, incredible 5-star film. The script is a little bit rough. There's maybe a few too many cliches and a bit, the script is a little bit choppy at times, maybe a few too many subplots that we didn't need because this is a short film. It runs a little over an hour and a half, save the credits. But look, Steers proved that he had something interesting to say. And while there is a lot to unpack here at times, the one thing he never really gets away from is the heart of his story and the heart of the human. And in that, he has Culkin, who really centers this film. For me, Igby Goes Down is a solid 4-star film. This dark indie comedy of the early aughts, they're so much fun to revisit. These somewhat honest portrayals of these characters who just can't seem to get out of their own way. Now, if you would like to see Igby Goes Down, right now you can either rent it or purchase it on most digital platforms, or you can stream it for free with commercials on both either Pluto TV or on Tubi. So, there you have it. We're just getting started with Actor Month on Rewind. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you like what you're hearing here and have been all along the way, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. You can follow me, Cinephile Mike, on all social media platforms and on Letterboxd. Find lots of great additional content on my website, cinephilemike.com. All right. Happy watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Cinephile Mike saying take a break and watch something new.